Welcome to Speaking History. In today's episode of the Historic Evil Women, we dive into the fascinating and controversial life of Cleopatra, one of the most extraordinary women in history. Known for her beauty, cunning, and ambition, Cleopatra's story is a blend of power, seduction, and betrayal that reshaped the ancient world. But beneath the allure lies a darker tale, one of ruthless ambition, manipulation, and moral decadence. Let's uncover the real Cleopatra and explore why she remains one of history's most enigmatic and infamous figures. The list of women who have used their charm, beauty, allure, and seductive influence to shake the world cannot be considered complete without mentioning Cleopatra. Her unmatched beauty has become part of countless stories, legends, and tales. However, historical accounts reveal that this enchanting woman was not just a killer of hearts and destroyer of faith, but also exceptionally intelligent and cunning. Opportunism and personal gain were more important to her than anything else. She possessed three qualities that, when used skillfully, could bend the course of history to one's will. Egypt's immense wealth lay at her feet, and she was unmatched in intelligence, diplomacy, and understanding human nature. Her captivating personality left those who saw her praying for the well-being of their own eyes. She used her wealth, beauty, and intelligence as weapons with remarkable craftiness and manipulation. Her charm and ruthlessness sent her own kin to the next world while enslaving her enemies. Had she succeeded in her schemes, the map of the world might have been different. This woman, a source of intrigue and chaos, was born in 69 BCE into the Ptolemaic dynasty. Regarding this dynasty, Kashif Zubair writes, "The last and 30th ruling dynasty of Egypt was purely European. One of Alexander the Great's capable generals, Ptolemy, conquered Egypt. After Alexander's death, he seized the opportunity and took control of Egypt. Initially, he presented himself as a governor, but soon donned the mantle of kingship and declared himself the king of Egypt, laying the foundation of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The early rulers of this family demonstrated great ambition and intellect. They avoided interfering with Egypt's way of life and restricted themselves to governance. Essentially, they adopted a secular style of rule. The public and priests showed no concern for the ruler's religion. For their satisfaction, it was enough that the rulers did not impose any restrictions on their religion and customs. To keep the priests and public content, Ptolemaic rulers would occasionally participate in specific religious ceremonies. As Greeks, the Ptolemies were enthusiasts of knowledge and literature. Ptolemy I made Alexandria his capital. Named after Alexander the Great, this city was located in the northwestern part of Egypt, 200 miles from the Nile Delta, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. It was perhaps the only major Egyptian city not situated on the Nile River. Due to its position on a busy maritime route, Alexandria quickly became an international trade hub. Goods from Africa and Arab nations passed through its port to Europe, while European goods were transported via land or the Red Sea to Eastern countries. These trade activities facilitated wealth accumulation, and prosperity gave rise to luxury, power struggles, and internal killings, which later became key characteristics of this dynasty's court life. Once in control of Egypt, the self-indulgent Greeks revealed their true nature, penning tales of debauchery and excess that overshadowed even Roman hedonism. According to Don B. Soda, Cleopatra VII assumed the throne of Egypt in 51 BCE alongside her 10-year-old brother Ptolemy the after their father's death. The siblings also became husband and wife and tried to manage the kingdom. However, within 3 years, the rude and sharp-tongued Cleopatra alienated her young husband's advisors and guards to such an extent that they considered killing her. Seeing the tightening noose around her, Cleopatra VII fled to Syria. It is worth noting that marriage among close blood relatives was part of Egyptian tradition. Yet despite being Greek, members of the Ptolemaic family adopted this abhorrent custom to satisfy their lust for power. Consequently, Cleopatra VII married her 10-year-old brother, who was entirely under the influence of his advisors and was not even capable of wearing royal attire properly. After fleeing to Syria, Cleopatra leveraged her captivating personality and the lure of wealth to assemble a respectable army. Her aim was to confront Ptolemy XII and reclaim Egypt. Ptolemy, too, prepared for battle with his supporters and army. The confrontation was set near what is now Port Said, a vast field in ancient times, with the fortress of Pelusium and an adjacent harbor. Before the siblings, both power-hungry, could engage in battle, a warship appeared on the shores of Pelusium. It was Pompey's ship, fleeing after a defeat, seeking refuge in Egypt to regroup and resist Caesar anew. This unexpected development both awed and alarmed the siblings. They feared their country might become a battleground for two mighty Roman powers, Caesar and Pompey. Ptolemy, swayed by his advisors' misguided counsel, chose treachery, having Pompey killed. This decision was rooted in the belief that Caesar, as Rome's ruler, would appreciate the act and ensure Egypt's autonomy. However, when Caesar learned of Pompey's assassination, he rushed to Egypt, leaving most of his army aboard his warships and entering Alexandria with only a few thousand soldiers. He went directly to the royal palace, where both Cleopatra and Ptolemy had also arrived. Caesar expressed satisfaction at Pompey's elimination, but condemned the deceit and treachery with which it was carried out. He proposed that the siblings present their case to him rather than resort to war. Meanwhile, Ptolemy's advisors conspired to mobilize Egypt's 20,000-strong army against Caesar, believing his small contingent could be easily annihilated. Adding to this tension, many Egyptians were enraged by Caesar's presence in their ruler's palace, viewing it as a precursor to slavery rather than autonomy. In response, Caesar detained Ptolemy and several key advisors under his guard, confident this move would neutralize any immediate threats. Ptolemy hoped to convince Caesar of his innocence and gain his favor, while Caesar, believing Ptolemy had no direct role in mobilizing the army, appeared inclined to side with him. The situation seemed to be shifting in Ptolemy's favor. Cleopatra, aware of these developments, recognized her precarious position. Her forces were less trained compared to Ptolemy's, and time was running out. Knowing that further delay would harm her cause, she resolved to sway Caesar to her side. Confident in her charm and beauty, Cleopatra believed she could achieve with allure what armies could not. However, reaching Caesar was a perilous task. Egyptian forces were stationed like a vast river around the area, and penetrating their lines was tantamount to courting death. Even if she reached the palace, being recognized could result in her immediate execution. Faced with no other option, Cleopatra devised a daring plan. What followed became a legendary tale, often described by storytellers as follows. A lush, heavy carpet was spread on the floor, with a delicate and strikingly beautiful woman lying at one end. The room contained only a powerful dark-skinned slave, his body glistening and taut with tension. He belonged to the loyal lineage of servants who unquestioningly obeyed their masters. But the command Cleopatra had given him left him more perplexed than astonished. "Did you not hear me?" Her authoritative voice echoed in the room. The queen gathered her courage and said, "I cannot comprehend the reason for this command." "How dare you?" The woman rose in anger, causing the servant to tremble and fall flat on his face before her. "Your Majesty, you have control over my life, but if I carry out this command, your own life will be in danger," he pleaded. "Your job is to obey orders." For some reason, her anger subsided slightly. Otherwise, those who dared to speak like this often didn't live long. She reclined again on the carpet and said, "Wrap me in it." This time, the servant approached to carry out the command. He knew his life depended on safely delivering this woman to her destination. Gently, he began rolling up the carpet, enclosing his delicate mistress within it. Despite her frail appearance, her determination put mountains to shame. The servant had turned the carpet into a roll, making it impossible from the outside to guess anyone was inside. Besides, the woman had a petite frame. Soon after, the woman and her devoted servant, Apollodorus, were in a small boat. Apollodorus signaled the rowers to start paddling. To an outsider, it was just an ordinary boat, but it carried a figure destined to leave an indelible mark on history. Her resolve and bravery would awe future historians, compelling them to recognize her as a remarkable ruler. The boat slipped into the darkness of the night and reached Alexandria's harbor. Quietly, it docked at the royal palace steps. Carrying the carpet on his shoulder, the servant emerged, only to be stopped by the guards. "Who are you, and what are you carrying?" "I am Ptolemy's servant, delivering a gift for the great Roman conqueror," the servant replied. Surprisingly, the guards allowed him to pass without inspection. Inside, he gave the same response until he reached a grand chamber where a middle-aged, yet dignified and charismatic man was savoring his drink. Bowing respectfully, the servant said, "I wish to present a gift to the world's conqueror." "Permission granted," the man gestured. Upon receiving permission, the servant placed the carpet on the floor and unrolled it. As the carpet unfurled, a smiling vision of beauty stood tall before the man. Caesar, who had been immersed in his drink, couldn't help but blink in disbelief. He had never seen such unparalleled, almost ethereal beauty in a woman's features. Cleopatra, the slender and radiant figure before him, conquered him with just one glance. It was said she came, she saw, and she conquered. But this time, she achieved what no one could imagine, risking her life to reach Caesar. Her daring act won his heart, and he fell for her completely. That night, Cleopatra unfolded the story of her charm, page by page, to Caesar. They became captivated by one another, and the decision swung in Cleopatra's favor. European historians write that the worldly and womanizing Caesar fell victim to the beauty of a young maiden who offered herself to him in her quest for power. She was ready to go to any lengths for her ambition, including becoming Caesar's mistress, a decision motivated by her political goals. As a result, Caesar advised Ptolemy to respect his limits and refrain from interfering with Cleopatra. He handed Cyprus to Egypt, effectively turning it into Cleopatra's domain. Not long after, to please her, Caesar mobilized his army and personally led them against Ptolemy XIII. Despite resistance, Ptolemy was defeated in 47 BCE, and Caesar secured a glorious victory for both Rome and Cleopatra. Now, Cleopatra was Egypt's queen with full authority and soon to be the mother of Caesar's son, later named Caesarion, Little Caesar. Legend has it, Cleopatra married her 11-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, but her true relationship was centered around Caesar. After the birth of their son, Caesar returned to Rome, determined to eliminate the powerful Egyptian ministers, advisors, and some of Cleopatra's own family members who had been captured during the war. Cleopatra followed Caesar to Rome to witness her adversary's demise firsthand. The Romans viewed Cleopatra as a manipulative, immoral woman who seduced their great leader and rendered him powerless through her charm. Their open disdain grew when Caesar declared her the goddess Venus and commissioned her statue in a temple, further deepening their hatred. During Caesar's stay in Egypt, his deputy Antony rose to prominence and became one of Rome's most influential figures. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE by Republicans, Cleopatra returned to Egypt. In Caesar's will, there was no mention of Cleopatra or Caesarion. Instead, power was transferred to Octavian, later Augustus. Ruthless and ambitious, Cleopatra had already eliminated family members who posed a threat to her reign, including her brother and sister. She extinguished the Ptolemaic dynasty with her own hands, emerging as a strong yet hedonistic queen of Egypt. Meanwhile, Antony delayed transferring power to Octavian, creating a power struggle. Eventually, Roman provinces were divided among Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. Cleopatra, still dreaming of becoming the queen of the world and securing the throne for her son, sought to use Roman power for her purposes. She decided to seduce Antony, who was quickly amassing victories and proving his authority. Displeased with Antony's agreement with Octavian, Cleopatra initially hesitated to meet him in Tarsus, but she ultimately decided to go, knowing she could exploit him for her ambitions. Chroniclers describe Cleopatra's deliberate use of her beauty and charm to captivate Antony. She prepared an elaborate royal barge and a grand fleet from Alexandria, setting sail with full confidence in her ability to ensnare the Roman giant. Fully prepared, she embarked on her journey, determined to conquer Antony's heart and mind. The historic city of Tarsus, located slightly upstream from the mouth of the Sydney River in a mountainous region, served as a riverine port renowned for its shipbuilding industry. Cleopatra's fleet sailed up the river and anchored at the Tarsus harbor. Mark Antony awaited her arrival, expecting Cleopatra to come to his court, but she was far too shrewd to comply. Instead, she remained aboard her luxurious royal barge, compelling Antony to invite her to his palace. Cleopatra, however, declined the invitation, and instead extended an invitation to Antony, which he accepted. At the banquet, Cleopatra showcased such extraordinary splendor and wealth that Antony and his companions were left astounded. The feast alone was lavish, but Cleopatra went further, gifting all the golden utensils and furniture used in the banquet to her guests. The estimated value of these gifts was no less than 500,000 pounds. The following day, she hosted another banquet, even grander than the first, with opulence flowing as if it were water. Yet what captivated Antony the most was not the luxury, but Cleopatra herself. Her regal demeanor combined with a particular charm and allure reserved exclusively for him. These feasts also displayed the sophistication and refinement of Egypt's centuries-old civilization, starkly contrasting with the culture of Rome, which, despite being a city, resembled the simplicity of an average Italian village. Antony, sensing his inferiority in comparison, fell victim to Cleopatra's calculated strategy. This clever manipulation aligned perfectly with Cleopatra's ambitions. European historians, who often depict Cleopatra as a licentious and extravagant woman, particularly highlight these feasts, including an incident where she reportedly dissolved a pearl worth 150,000 pounds in wine to impress Antony. Cleopatra employed her immense wealth to dazzle Antony while using her seductive charms, including physical allure, to bind him further. After Julius Caesar, Antony was the only man capable of advancing Cleopatra's ambitions. Having eliminated her brother and husband, Ptolemy XIII, she now ruled alongside Ptolemy XIV, a puppet ruler under her control. Cleopatra's ruthlessness left no rival standing within her family, ensuring her authority was unchallenged, except for her son, whose presence she used as a facade to maintain her reign. By ensnaring Antony, who ruled the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire, Cleopatra sought to fulfill her imperial ambitions. Antony, enamored and completely captivated, laid his military and political power at Cleopatra's feet. As his consort, she bore him 2 children and, in 34 BCE, married him, later giving birth to a 3rd child. To keep Antony pleased and satisfy her own indulgent nature, Cleopatra organized lavish celebrations and morally questionable gatherings, the details of which are highly scandalous. These extravagant festivities often spanned several days, marked by rampant revelry, public displays of intimacy, and indulgence in debauchery. Cleopatra reportedly had an extraordinary fondness for provocative dances, even encouraging men and women to perform nude dances while she herself appeared semi-nude to further mesmerize Antony. Such hedonistic events, accompanied by Cleopatra's growing influence over Antony, enraged the Roman Senate. Antony's political decisions and actions, driven by Cleopatra's persuasion, alienated his Roman allies, including Octavian, whose alliance with Antony ultimately disintegrated. In response, Rome declared war on Egypt. The ensuing battles culminated in Octavian's decisive victory, leaving Antony's forces decimated. Antony, having succumbed entirely to Cleopatra's charms, lost his stature as a great general and, despite her urging, could achieve nothing. In 31 BCE, Antony's military power was utterly destroyed, and he took his own life. Now Cleopatra found herself utterly helpless against Octavian's advancing forces. The invading Roman ruler captured Cleopatra with the intention of taking her to Rome as a trophy, along with the spoils of war and prisoners. His plan was to publicly humiliate her by parading her naked through the streets of Rome as a warning to anyone who dared challenge the might of the Roman Empire. To ensure she could not escape, he tightened security around his beautiful captive. However, Cleopatra somehow learned of the disgraceful treatment she would face in Rome. Desperate, she attempted to take her own life by plunging a dagger into her chest. But her attempt was thwarted, and the security was made even stricter. Despite the precautions, Cleopatra managed to deceive her guards. Through a farmer, she had her means of death smuggled into her cell, a highly venomous snake hidden inside a small clay pot placed in a basket of figs. Following in the footsteps of her beloved Antony, she resolved to end her own life. She prepared meticulously, bathing, dressing in her finest attire, adorning herself with jewelry, perfuming her body, and placing a crown on her head. With a calm demeanor, she reclined gracefully. Her maidservants handed her the clay pot from which she retrieved the small but lethal snake. Cleopatra provoked the serpent and allowed it to bite her on the chest, sealing her fate. Thus ended the life of the ambitious queen, whose beauty and tales have been told for over 2,000 years. She was buried beside Antony, and a few days later, her son Caesarion was also killed. Historians hold this colorful queen responsible for the downfall of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which marked the end of Egypt's 4,000-year-long independence and led to its subjugation under Roman rule. Consumed by her lust for power, Cleopatra annihilated her own family, mercilessly ordered the execution of her rivals, and used her seductive charm as a weapon, from lowly servants to Roman generals. She hosted morally corrupt gatherings and shameful celebrations. Although she often poisoned others to eliminate them, in the end, she herself fell victim to a snake, the very creature depicted on her crown as the symbol of the Queen of Egypt. Thank you for watching this episode of the Historic Evil Women. If you enjoyed learning about the intriguing and scandalous life of Cleopatra, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment to tell us your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Speaking History and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode.